Thank you, thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
I cannot trust my doctor anymore. I can't, because have you noticed that whenever we're sick and they prescribe something for us, the side effects are worse than the original problem? Okay, there is a prescription sleeping pill that's supposed to cure insomnia, but the side effects are amnesia and paranoia. How does that work? You're like, hey, how'd you sleep? I don't remember. Who sent you? I talk about this and I share this with people because I had something happen to me recently. I was mortified. I had a really severe stomach ache, from eating my own cooking. Wish I was joking. My doctor prescribed dicyclomine. I went to the pharmacy to pick it up, and when you can go to the pharmacy now, they give you a pamphlet, tells you all about the drug. Right on top, it said dicyclomine. This medication may cause stomach ache. Okay, some of you are with me. I'll recap. I had a stomach ache. Doctor gave me something that caused a stomach ache. Y'all, this is like going into the emergency room with a gunshot wound and having the doctor pump 2 more in you.
Good morning. It's Friday, Police Craft Friday, October the 11th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and 400 things cops know. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now this is the headlines for October the 11th. Husband accidentally shoots, wounds wife at Orange County home, police say. Los Angeles become first city to recognize National Coming Out Day. One person hospitalized after deputy-involved shooting in Castaic. Non-citizens would be allowed to vote under Santa Ana ballot measure. Boeing to cut approximately 17,000 jobs over the coming months. Coroner IDs 4 of 5 people killed in Catalina Island plane crash. Mount Everest climber who disappeared in 1924 may have been found. Man's January 6 sentencing memo warns of risk of another attack. Family-owned Baldwin Park Eatery features authentic Oaxacan flavors. Suspects leave ATM at Van Nuys Market after botched smash and grab. And those were the headlines for Friday, October the 11th. Back in a minute. Thanks. And now, the election corner.
Does this piss you off? Because do you want to know what pisses me off? The fact that my ancestors fought way too hard for black people to be allowed to learn how to read, just for y'all to expect me to be uneducated enough to support Kamala Harris for the sole reason that y'all claim she's black. Kamala Harris could be as dark as a P. Diddy party, and I still wouldn't vote for that godless she-devil. The Democrats are the reason that so many black boys are illiterate. The Democrats are the reason that so many black communities are ridden with poverty. The Democrats are the reason that black people are begging from handouts from massive government. And the Democrats are the reason that so many black people are wanting black-only spaces, aka segregation. It's as if the Democrats are trying to bring back slavery and Jim Crow, considering they were the party that was in favor of those two eras in the first place. Yet, y'all are so brainwashed by Democratic propaganda that you call me a sellout because I don't buy into the narrative that the Democrats own me and my unwavering loyalty simply because of my skin color. There is no self-hatred in my body because I am proud to be a black American, so much so that I am going to vote this November for the man who almost lost his life twice to fight for my country and to fight for my home. And that man is Donald Jaquan Trump. And notice I didn't stutter.
And that was the Election Corner. Back in a minute. Thank you, and now the Patriotic Short.
While flying over North Vietnam, Captain Lance Saigon ejected from his disabled aircraft and evaded capture for over 6 weeks, despite being seriously injured, in shock, and suffering from extreme weight loss due to lack of food. After finally being captured by North Vietnamese soldiers, he was taken to a holding area for transfer to a POW camp. Despite his emaciated and crippled state, Captain Saigon overpowered one of his guards and crawled into the jungle, only to be recaptured after several hours. He was moved to another prison camp where he was placed in solitary confinement and subjected to intense interrogation and torture. Despite the brutality, Captain Saigon refused to provide any information to his captors. He eventually slipped into delirium and was placed under the care of another prisoner. Even in his brief moments of consciousness, he never complained about his physical condition and often talked about future escape attempts. For his dedication to his country, Captain Saigon was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor.
And that was the Patriotic Short. Back in a minute. Thank you, and now about 5 minutes of motivation.
Controls our life. And everything's trying to get our focus all the time, right? Advertisers trying to get our focus, your phone's ringing, in your pocket it's buzzing, and that buzz is either your phone or it's an email or it's a text. There's this constant something trying to get control of our focus. But what you focus on determines your destiny in your life. So if you don't take control of it, somebody else will.
If I don't finally get my focus in check, if I keep wandering around distracted, if I keep looking at every new thing that pops up, if I keep trying every single new opportunity, if I keep saying yes to everything, if I keep listening to everybody's complaints, and if I keep doing whatever they ask me to do, at some point, you'll lose your life.
You can lose track of the long-term goal. It fades from your vision. It slips from your mind. But I don't accept that. I want that long-term goal to be so embedded in my mind that I never lose sight of it, ever.
You need to have a mission for what you're doing today. You should figure out what is it you desire in life and figure out the steps to get there and start working a plan to get there and minimizing everything else. Getting very clear on the mission, and working the plan. Everything else, guess what it gets? A no.
Every day, do something that moves you toward that goal, that keeps that goal alive and in sight and in focus. However small or insignificant that step might seem, take it, do it, make it happen.
Where will you be in your business and your life in 36 months? Not because you hope, because you decide. If there's something you once envisioned and now it's real, it's because you focused on it continuously, didn't you? When you focus on something continuously, something magical happens. You get insights, don't you? You overhear a conversation and you hear something you wouldn't have heard if you didn't have that outcome or goal that you wanted so badly.
What are the things that are stealing your focus? Who are the people that are stealing your focus? And begin to eliminate these distractions. Get laser focused and obsessed on what you want. Be starving and hungry to get it. Be desperate to get it. The combination of desperation and hunger with laser focus over an extended period of time is the formula to be great at something.
The question you want to ask yourself is, what do I want? The target is not the activity. The activity can change. It's what's the result I'm after. Clarity is power. The more clear you are and specifically what you want, the faster your brain can get you there. Because your brain's like a servo mechanism in a missile. It locks on the heat signature. What does it do? It moves and follows it. That's the way your brain is if it knows the outcome, if it knows the result.
You cannot accomplish what you have not focused on. If you're not focusing on it, it can't happen. You're so focused on everything else but you, and you don't realize you are what's going to blow you up. You are what's going to change your situation. You are what's going to take you to the next level. Stop focusing on 4 things at once, and I need you to concentrate on one thing at a time. And most of you in this room, you can't give up 6 months. You can't give up 8 months. You can't let stuff go for a few weeks. Like you can't let girls go. Some of you just can't let boys go. Some of you just can't let parties go. Let it go. If you want to be successful, if you want to dominate in the area, you got to let everything go but that thing you're pursuing. You can't chase two rabbits and catch both of them. So you put your attention on one and go after it. You got to stay focused. Stay focused. Stay focused on the goal. Champions are focused on the goal. They don't have time to be doing stuff that's not going to help them toward the goal. We wake up and grind. Winners win. I focus on winning. Eye on the tiger. I want you to be so focused. I want you to be so concentrated that you block out all noise, that you block out all sound. You got to get to that point like you like that eagle. You know that eagle that's 100 and some odd feet in the air, and that eagle is flying around, and all of a sudden it looks down in the Atlantic Ocean and it sees its prey, and all of a sudden, bam! All that eagle does is one time, it brings out its wings. It shows its face toward where it's going. It puts its head down, and boom, it dives down. It doesn't look to the right. It doesn't look to the left. It doesn't look up. It doesn't look further down. It looks straight at its prey, and it goes, pow, straight down into the Atlantic Ocean. Straight down, eyes focused, arms out steady, and bam, it scoops up its prey, and it keeps on going. And I'm telling you, if you're going to blow up, if you're going to get to the next level, you got to stay focused. You got to learn how to concentrate. What makes a person average is their focus. And so what you're focusing on throughout the course of the day, it has to change. What you're looking at, what you're reading, what you're watching, the conversations you have. You must now be focused on your why, and you must be focused on your dreams. You must be focused on your goals. When you are great, you don't focus on a week. When you are great, you don't focus on a month. When you are great, you don't focus on a year. I'm not saying the same thing wrong with planning, but what I'm talking about is you concentrate on the 24-hour that's in front of you, and you nail it. I want you to focus on here right now. Don't you worry about when you get home. You concentrate on this opportunity. You don't worry about tomorrow. You concentrate on this opportunity with all your might, with all your soul, with all your heart. You focus on this, and tomorrow will take care of itself.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of meditation, about 5 minutes. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Daily Stoic.
Cowardice as a design problem. Life without a design is erratic. As soon as one is in place, principles become necessary. I think you'll concede that nothing is more shameful than uncertain and wavering conduct and beating a cowardly retreat. This will happen in all our affairs unless we remove the faults that seize and detain our spirits, preventing them from pushing forward and making an all-out effort. Seneca, Moral Letters, 95.46. The opposing team comes out strong, establishes an early lead, and you never had time to recover. You walk into a business meeting or caught off guard, and the whole thing goes poorly. A delicate conversation escalates into a shouting match. You switched majors halfway through college and had to start your coursework over and graduate late. Sound familiar? It's the chaos that ensues from not having a plan. Not because plans are perfect, but because people without plans, like a line of infantrymen without a strong leader, are much more likely to get overwhelmed and fall apart. The Super Bowl winning coach Bill Walsh used to avoid this risk by scripting the beginning of his games. If you want to sleep at night before the game, he said in a lecture on game planning, have your first 25 plays established in your own mind the night before that. You can walk into the stadium and you can start the game without that stress factor. You'll also be able to ignore a couple of early points or a surprise from your opponent. It's irrelevant to you. You already have your marching orders. Don't try to make it up on the fly. Have a plan.
And that was the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Here I'm standing before you as a bishop of the Catholic Church, and I got this thing in gold because that's a taunt. See what I'm saying? I wear that as a taunt. That Roman cross would represent every lousy, negative, cruel, hateful aspect of the sinful world. This symbol. You know, if you get on our wrong side, we're going to hang you on this thing until you die. Yeshua, this friend of Peter and John and James, was crucified on one of these awful instruments of torture. And God raised him from the dead. Which means what, everybody? That God's love and mercy are more powerful than anything that's in the world. We say, well, it's this nice religious symbol. No. It's a taunt. You think this scares us? We're going to put gold on it. Because we realize God is more powerful than this awful thing.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, what you see around you today among modern intellectuals is the grotesque spectacle of such attributes as militant uncertainty, crusading cynicism, dogmatic agnosticism, boastful self-abasement, and self-righteous depravity. The two absolutes of today's non-absolutists are that ignorance consists of claiming knowledge and that immorality consists of pronouncing moral judgments. Unquote. That's Ayn Rand from Faith and Force, The Destroyers of the Modern World, from the book Philosophy, Who Needs It? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the 33 Strategies of War.
Emerged that does not need the threat of dirty weapons to create a more devastating result. On September 11th, 2001, a handful of terrorists linked to the Islamic Al-Qaeda movement produced the single deadliest terrorist action to date in their attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C. The attack had many of the earmarks of classic terrorism. A small group with extremely limited means, using the technology of the United States at their disposal, was able to strike with maximum effect. Here was the familiar asymmetry of forces in which smallness becomes an asset, being inconspicuous within the larger population and accordingly quite difficult to detect. The terror of the event itself set in motion a panic-like reaction from which the United States has still not fully recovered. The drama and symbolism of the Twin Towers themselves, not to mention the Pentagon, created a grotesquely compelling spectacle that gave the terrorists maximum exposure while incisively demonstrating the vulnerability of the United States, often described in recent years as the world's only remaining superpower. There were those around the world who had never imagined that America could be so quickly and seriously harmed, but were delighted to find they were wrong. Many deny that 9/11 was a new form of terrorism. It simply distinguished itself, they say, by the number of its victims. The change was quantitative, not qualitative. And, as in classical terrorism, these analysts continue, Al-Qaeda is ultimately doomed to failure. The U.S. counterattack on Afghanistan destroyed their operational base, and they are now the targets of the unbending will of the American government, whose invasion of Iraq was a stage in a grand strategy to rid the region of terrorism in general.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War. Back in a minute. Now Barney and Company.
John Lasky, guys, thank you. Barney and Company is now. Good morning, Stuart.
Good morning, Cheryl, and good morning, everyone. One of the things Wall Street cares about is inflation. Here's the news. The producer price index went up 1.8% over the last 12 months. That's stronger than expected. It was unchanged in the month of September. It's hard to figure out the inflation trend here. Very little movement up or down, and that's reflected in the market. The Dow Industrials this morning will open with a minor loss. Same with the S&P. Nasdaq down about 53 points. Check out the 10-year Treasury yield, still well above 4%. You're back to 4.10%. As for the 2-year, that's still not quite back to 4%, but it's close, 3.96%. Politics. Donald Trump floats another tax break. In Detroit, he proposed a tax deduction on the interest on car loans. He's on a roll. Polls show him leading in the battleground states of Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada. Kamala Harris has stalled, and Democrats are getting nervous. Barack Obama has appealed for more support for Harris from black voters. On a Spanish-language channel, Kamala Harris again had trouble. She couldn't set herself apart from Joe Biden. On the show today, Hurricane Milton, 17 people have died. The cleanup begins. It seems the worst damage came from the tornadoes. And FEMA says it has already used up half its budget in just the last few days. We'll get the harrowing personal stories from victims all across Florida. We'll show you Elon Musk's cyber cab, as in the robo-taxi. No steering wheel, priced under $30,000. Production starts in 2026. Investors absolutely not impressed. The stock down about 6%. And we have this for you. A boat captain rescued miles from land after Hurricane Milton. He'd been floating on a cooler for hours. One lucky guy. Friday, October 11th, 2024, Barney and Company is about to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Varney. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you should vote Republican because aggression against others reverses into aggression against the self. The more a person contains aggression against others, the more strict and coercive the conscience becomes. The internalization of violence also proves useful to the exercise of rule. It ensures that the obedient subject internalizes the external ruling authority, making it a part of itself. This allows the authority to rule with far less effort. Symbolic violence is also a violence that makes use of the mechanism of habit. It inscribes itself within the things that are taken for granted, in habitual patterns of perception and of behavior. Violence is naturalized, as it were. Without the effort of physical, martial violence, it ensures that the established ruling relationship is maintained. The psychological internalization of force also serves disciplinary ends. By way of subtle, discrete interventions, it infiltrates the subject's neural paths and muscle fibers, subjugating it to outside ortho and neurocorrective compulsions and imperatives. The wholesale violence of decapitation, which prevails in the society of sovereignty, yields to the violence of successive subcutaneous deformation. Back in a minute. Thank you. So a little bit of law and order here.
Laura, take the deal.
Well, we tried our best.
I talked to her. She said that she'll take Man 2 and do 5 years.
That's a non-starter. Hell, Man 1 was a gift.
A gift? Do you have any concept of what that woman has been through? Any concept at all?
Okay, I have tremendous empathy for what she has endured, but the fact remains she killed a man.
Okay, so right there he makes a mistake. Again, the battle here is between people that are acting in good faith and those that are acting in bad faith. And the people that are, whether you call the people that are acting in bad faith lefties or liberals or socialists or moderates, that's the issue. Are they acting in good or bad faith? What the woman here is trying to do with this guy, it's a discussion between an NYPD, the character is an NYPD captain, and the man is an assistant district attorney. And the discussion is basically about a woman who was raped and who murdered her rapist, whether or not, what kind of a plea deal she should take. So then, of course, the captain, the woman, says, a gift? Do you know what she's been through? Now, he is then going on defense. Of course, I have empathy for her. Because now what this woman has succeeded in doing, this captain, is making him the problem. He becomes the problem. If he's going to win this argument, win this battle, he's got to turn it around. Okay? And the way you do that is simply come back and ask her a question. Are you lecturing me? Okay? You've got to get her, stop her momentum. Because if you start defending yourself, then she's going to come back with another accusation, and you're never going to stop backing up. Let's see how this finishes.
An innocent man. And like it or not, he's the victim. He is the one we need to be worried about.
Well, in this particular case, she failed to follow up, so he's off the hook. But in real life, when you have a situation like that, when somebody is getting that tone of voice, and that's what you got to listen for. It's not just what they're saying, it's how they're saying it. That's what leads you to ask the question, what are they doing? And that's where you realize, oh, this person is lecturing me. So that's where you can come back and say, excuse me, are you lecturing me? And then that's where the true battle begins. But again, otherwise, you're going to put yourself on the defensive, and as long as the other person continues to follow up and make an accusation after accusation after accusation, you're going to find yourself in a big hole in a hurry. Don't let anyone intimidate you. If somebody that is not supposed to be lecturing you, some people can, your parents, your boss, something like that. But in this situation, these are two equals. And so for one to be lecturing the other without good cause is acting in bad faith. And they are the problem. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now I'm going to play Apollo, Chapter 2 and Chapter 2, Part 1. And normally I play Apollo on Wednesdays, but I played Rules for Radicals instead by mistake. So, and I had said that I was going to play Apollo either on Thursday or Friday. So since the Cops episode is on the short side, then, and this one is also on the short side, I will go ahead and play it today. So here it is, Chapter 2 and Chapter 2, Part 1 of Apollo.
Chapter 2. I could picture the astronauts looking down at it with binoculars. Immediately to the north of the White House stands Lafayette Square, a formal park of grass and trees crisscrossed by brick paths. During the first half of the 19th century, when wealthy Washingtonians built townhouses along the three sides of the square facing the White House, Lafayette Square became the most fashionable address in the city. One of these houses still stands at the northeast corner of the square. It is one of the larger houses, washed in a pale lemon, with a handsome bay window overlooking the park. Built in 1820, it was given to the widow of the fourth President of the United States in payment of a debt owed to her husband, and it has been called by her name ever since, Dolly Madison House. In the spring of 1959, Dolly Madison House was the headquarters of NASA, an organization still so compact that its entire headquarters staff could be housed in that one townhouse and a small adjoining office building on H Street. One spring day, not long after Owen Maynard's introduction to Langley, Max Faget walked up the front steps on H Street and was ushered into the Federalist drawing room that now served as the office of the NASA administrator. Faget had come up from Langley at Keith Glennon's invitation to make a presentation to an informal seminar that the administrator periodically convened on an ad hoc basis. It was almost like a symposium, Faget recalled, not to deal with management issues, but more or less to blue sky things. Werner von Braun was attending that day up from Huntsville. He wasn't yet part of NASA, but Glennon liked to call on him for advice, and von Braun, who longed to be part of the space program, was glad to oblige. William Pickering, director of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, had flown in from Pasadena. Representing headquarters, besides Glennon himself, were Abe Silverstein, director of spaceflight programs, and Donald Ostrander, director of launch vehicle programs. It was as august a group as little NASA could assemble. In 1959, Max Faget was chief of the Flight Systems Division of the Space Task Group, a top position within the Space Task Group, but one that left him far junior to the others in the meeting. Yet Glennon had called him up from Langley because Glennon had an exotic problem for the group to blue sky. Already, Max Faget was becoming known in the flight engineering world as a man who could do that like nobody else. 1. Maxime Faget is a wonderfully felicitous name for a spacecraft designer calling up an image of some quirky artisan genius at Cartier or Dior, not an inaccurate image for describing the real Maxime Faget. Faget would never be able to compete with von Braun or the astronauts for public recognition, but within the spaceflight fraternity, he would acquire a unique reputation. A story is told about a time in the 1970s when a James Michener sought out some old-time Langley engineers to ask for their help with the novel Michener was writing about the space program. Michener had envisioned a central character who was an engineering eminence. The engineer would have graduated with highest honors from Princeton, the nation's preeminent aeronautical engineering school, and have been a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. Then he would have returned to Princeton, this time to the Institute of Advanced Studies, from which he would become the anonymous genius behind the American space program. Could the Langley engineers think of a person whom the author might use as a model for this character? One of them said, "Yes, we used to have a fellow like that around here." He hesitated. Would it be okay if he was born in British Honduras and got his degree from Louisiana State? From an old Louisiana family of French extraction, Max Faget was born in British Honduras because his father, an eminent physician in the Public Health Service, was conducting research there on tropical diseases. The young Faget got his engineering degree from Louisiana State in 1943 and went from there to combat duty on submarines in the Pacific. After he was discharged, he and a friend from LSU stopped by to interview at Langley as a lark. Faget didn't know a thing about aviation, Bob Gilruth remembered later, but he was bright and he was interested, and Gilruth was impressed by someone who would volunteer for submarine duty in wartime. So Max Faget was hired, the man who went on to become the principal creative force behind the development of American manned spacecraft from Mercury through the shuttle. It was not immediately apparent to people who first met Faget that he was a budding legend. "I was being interviewed by a guy about where I'd like to work," recalled Tom Markley, who went to Langley in 1956. "It was just my first week out of college, and so I said, 'I don't know.' He said, 'You've got a physics background. I think maybe you ought to work for Max Faget.' I said, 'Okay.' So he called Max down, and pretty soon this little guy in a pair of jeans and a white t-shirt walks in. I thought, what have I gotten myself into?" At that time, Faget was first making his name in the world beyond Langley as the man who developed the blunt body shape for the Mercury capsule. It was a considerable triumph. Others, notably at Ames Research Center, had been arguing for a lifting body, a shape with some of the characteristics of an aerodynamic wing. Faget demonstrated that the blunt ballistic shape, he had adapted it from the blunt body concept used for ballistic missile nose cones, not only would be simpler and faster to implement, an exceedingly important consideration after Sputnik, but also would have enough lift to be maneuverable. Markley first realized what Faget was up to sometime in 1957, before the Space Task Group was formed. Markley was walking through the PARD shop at Langley when he looked up and saw Max, all by himself, standing on a balcony overlooking the shop. He was throwing what looked like paper plates out over the balcony. "I thought he was crazy at first," said Markley. "I just stood there and looked at him." He finally walked up the steps to the balcony. As he got closer, he could see that Faget had taped pairs of paper plates together, back to front. "Max, what are you doing?" Markley asked. "I think these things will really fly. We have some lift-over drag in this thing," Faget answered, as he sailed another pair of plates out over the shop floor. Down on the floor, the shop technicians continued to work unperturbed. They were used to this sort of thing from Max. Standing only 5 feet 6 inches tall, slight, natty in his bow tie when he got dressed up for outsiders, Faget looked deceptively boyish and harmless. This impression usually lasted only briefly, however. He was opinionated, completely outspoken. He wouldn't pull back an iota, said John Disher, who had to deal with him from headquarters. If you had a dumb idea or he thought you were dumb, he'd tell you to your face. Along with that bluntness went supreme self-confidence. "It never occurs to him that he can be wrong," said his closest collaborator, Cadwell Johnson. "A lot of people have got a great deal of self-doubt. They hesitate to do things because they're not all that damn sure they're right. Max is never in any doubt in his mind whether he's right or wrong. And that's good. Goddamn, if you don't have a few people like that, you're not going to get anywhere." And yet, oddly, for a man of such strong opinions and large ego, Faget seems to have been liked by just about everyone who worked with him. "A sweetheart," said Owen Maynard. "He was always laughing and joking," said Markley, "a great guy to grow up under." Max was a very likable guy, Disher confirmed. He just detested higher authority. Perhaps the best way to describe Faget's style is cheerful ruthlessness. His associates recalled knockdown, drag-out technical arguments with him. Faget's voice would rise, his face would flush, and then it would pass as quickly as a summer storm, and Max would be off on something else. The only thing you had to remember when you were around Faget was that once he got absorbed in something, you were well advised to keep a safe distance. One engineer who used to play squash with him in the astronauts' gym at Houston recalled that Faget would beat the hell out of you with a racket if you didn't watch out. The two men were the best of friends, had been for years, but nonetheless, you had to play defensively because Max didn't make any effort whatsoever to avoid hitting you, and you'd lose a lot of points that way. On the other hand, once Faget's absorption in something was finished, that was it. He was curiously detached about his spacecraft once they had left his hands. He didn't go to see them launched. He could have. He was not required in mission control the way operations people were, but he always managed to be too busy with something else. In later years, he relented and went to see one of the Apollo launches, but only one. Nor did he change in later years, even after he retired from NASA. Max Faget, the lead designer of the shuttle, as of the end of 1988, had never gone to Cape Canaveral to watch a shuttle launch. Even when he was in the control center, Faget seemed indifferent to the flights. It was an outgrowth of the traditional cleavage of design people and operations people in the world of aviation. Max completely hated operations, one said. Cadwell Johnson explained, Max always pissed and moaned about the operations guys, about how you design a good spacecraft and then they come along and screw it all up. And that's not so. That's not so at all. But it's kind of a built-in professional disagreement. Faget seldom bothered with a drafting table. He worked from ordinary coordinated paper, the kind sold at the corner drugstore. And while he knew what all the alphas and epsilons of the engineering world meant, he didn't start with them when confronting a problem. Once, when a visitor asked him whether he was an intuitive engineer, he answered, I think I'm an intuitive engineer, yes. There is such a thing as a talent for things. I think I have a talent for it. You know, it depends on how you want to use your tools and how you want to do your analysis. I can almost go in a trance. I can get fully absorbed in a problem to the point of almost, well, you really have to distract me to get my attention. How long does this last, he was asked. I don't know. I really don't know. Oh, sometimes days and weeks. You can't stand it but so long. I won't say a trance, you know, you just stare at the wall. Your brain is working. I know that. It takes energy. You're tired after you've come out of it. To his colleagues, the products of Faget's trances sometimes seemed more like imaginative leaps than solid, precise engineering. One of them used to claim that Faget stood for flat-ass guess every time. But the consensus of the engineers who worked closely with Faget was that his batting average was astonishingly high. Max had brilliant ideas, and he was usually right, said John Disher, and that was the way that he came to be perceived throughout NASA. This country has owed a debt of gratitude to Max for a long time, maintained Glenn Lunny, an operations man. 40 years after he was first hired at Langley, a colleague since NACA days would describe Max Faget by saying, the United States could run for the next 100 years on the ideas Max had while he was shaving this morning.
And that was Chapter 2 and Chapter 2 Part 1 of Apollo. And next Wednesday will be Chapter 2 Part 2 of Apollo. And I really like this book because it goes back to the days in which smart was valued. Over the decades since the 60s and the Apollo program, the Nancy Pelosi and her acolytes have been busy trying to turn things around and make stupidity of value and smart a disvalue. And they do that by creating sympathy or empathy for the stupid and mocking and ridiculing the smart. So we can fix that with our kids. So when your kids are going to school, reward them for good grades. How you care to reward them, of course, that's going to be up to you. We used to get money when we'd come home from grade school and we had a paper and we got a gold star or a silver star, we got a nickel. So, back in a minute. Thank you. And now, 400 Things Cops Know, Chapter 11.
Chapter 11. 18 Things Cops Know About Traffic. Every vehicle stop is a story waiting to be told. Sergeant Wayne Corcoran, Phoenix Police Department. 1. Plenty of drivers are out there with no license or one that is suspended or revoked. When you stop such drivers and ask for their license, the first thing they say often begins with, "I was just," as in, "I was just going to the movies," or "I was just dropping off a friend." They seem to think their claim of driving a short distance is a mitigating factor, as if the only people who really deserve tickets for unlicensed driving are those in the midst of cross-country odysseys. 2. A high-velocity vehicle collision can leave the impression of a person's clothing on a bumper. Pedestrians can get hit so hard by cars that they are knocked clean out of their shoes, which remain at the point of impact. 3. If the airbags are deployed, they can save your life, but they come out with such force that they can also break jaws and noses and cause chemical burns upon inflation. 4. If you have a choice between pulling over a frosted-haired old lady with fresh flowers in the back seat of her sensible Lincoln Town Car, or a sedan crammed with slouching teens in gangland apparel, you're going to stop the latter more often than not, and be content you've done right. Some may criticize this kind of approach as profiling. That's exactly what it is. I'm not sure when profiling became a bad word. Profiling is common sense and good police work. I'm not talking about racial profiling, which is not only wrong but doesn't make any sense, as criminals come in all colors and creeds, and some of the worst guys you'll arrest will be whiter than Chip Hilton. But you can profile without using race. After all, it just comes down to choices. Do you want to stop the guy with darting eyes who just pulled away from the front of a dope house? Or the station wagon full of elementary school kids wearing birthday hats? Which stop would probably be more fruitful if you're looking to reduce crime? You play the odds. 5. Give the offending driver either a ticket or a lecture. It's not fair to give both. 6. Figuring out if the person driving the car you've stopped has permission to do so gets complicated, as cars often don't list the driver. Now you have to figure out whose car this is in order to ensure that it isn't an unreported theft. The problem is that cars, particularly beaters, change hands so frequently with so little corresponding documentation that the titled owner may be the fourth to last person to actually possess the vehicle. Then you ask the driver who the owner is, and he says something like, "I don't know, I got it from my guy off 20th and Scott." "What's your guy's name?" "Peanut." "What's his real name?" "I don't know, they just call him Peanut." 7. During a traffic stop, it pays to watch the passengers before approaching the vehicle to see if anyone's shoulders rise, which can indicate he just took a gun out of his waistband to either use on officers or conceal under the seat. More advanced criminals put some serious work into hiding their contraband. They'll drive trap cars where if you hit, say, 2 buttons under the steering wheel in connection with turning the radio dial to 101.8, a secret compartment will pop open near the center console with a gun and a brick of coke in it. Such hiding spots are incredibly difficult to find, which makes it all the sweeter when you are able to crack the code. 8. If you pull over a driver and he claims not to speak English, you may take this at face value and call for a translator or use the language line provided by the department. But if you suspect the guy is faking in an attempt to so frustrate you linguistically that you'll just let him go, ask him why there's a $20 bill on the passenger seat next to him. If he looks over there, ask him how it was he understood that. 9. Where you pull a car over is important. In front of a bar during closing time, for instance, is a poor choice, unless you want an assortment of loud drunks stumbling in front of your squad, interacting with the stopped driver and woozily critiquing your patrol techniques. And if the driver eases to a halt in some dark alley blocks away from where you first lit him up, consider the very real possibility that you're walking into an ambush. Call for backup, take your gun out, and be ready for some gunplay. 10. If you conduct a traffic stop and the driver immediately lights up a cigarette, he probably has a warrant and is trying to get one good last one in before the cuffs go on. This is known as the felony smoke. Sometimes such a felon will try to pass off the name and date of his brother or cousin as his own, but stumble on the pertinent information like his age or astrological sign, leaving you to ask, "What given name can I finally interest you in today, sir?" If instead of lighting up a smoke, the driver sticks his head out the window and peers back at you, be on your guard. Typically, the only people who perform this curiosity peek are criminals or people doing documentaries on law enforcement. 11. Traffic stops are the great unknown. When you pull a car over, the driver can be your fourth-grade viola teacher or some disgruntled employee heading to work to right perceived wrongs at gunpoint. You never know what you're going to get. Treat all traffic stops as potential deadly encounters. Be pleasant, but also be prepared to shoot everyone you meet. 12. Some guys will claim you pulled them over just because they're an ethnic minority. What they may not realize is that much of the time you can't even tell the race of a driver because of low light, window tint, or distance. As far as you know, it could be your own mother behind the wheel. 13. Don't ever try to stop a moving car by leaping onto its hood. You are not William Shatner of T.J. Hooker. You're not even Adrian Zemed. 14. Once in a while, you'll effect a traffic stop and the driver will claim to be ill and on the way to the hospital. So you ask if it's a medical emergency and inquire as to whether they need an ambulance. Most say no. But I did have one woman who asked for an ambulance after complaining of some rather vague symptoms. I followed her to the hospital and wrote out her tickets there. She seemed surprised by this, and when asked by the triage nurse what her chief complaint was, she struggled to come up with one. I thought about suggesting the cop didn't go away when I faked a medical problem as her chief complaint, but ultimately thought better of it. 15. In a perfect world, a world nothing like this one, drivers would immediately and safely pull over to the right when a squad car with lights and siren approached. This is what the law requires. But you always have the motorists who pull into the right lane but keep going at the same clip, paralleling you, as if they have just deputized themselves and are responding along with you to lend a hand. Or you get the drivers who have plenty of room to change lanes, but instead elect to stop dead in front of you, too paralyzed to move, as if this situation will somehow go away if they remain perfectly still. There are various reasons for this non-compliance with the law. Some drivers are absorbed in their cell phones. Others drive cars that are sound baffled, making it more difficult to hear sirens. A police sergeant I know once told me he'd be off duty and look in his rearview mirror and see the lights of a patrol car right on top of him. Why didn't he notice that squad car before? Because, he explained, he was half dead from listening to his own sirens for the last 16 years. Whatever the reason, nothing is more infuriating than being slowed down on your way to a hot call. Even the most low-wattage officer has been known to howl obscenities at the errant motorist. Most of the frustration stems from the precious seconds ticking away. But what also goads you is that there isn't much you can do about it. You can't stop and issue the driver a ticket because the call you're going to can't wait. You might be able to scroll down their license number, but it's difficult to find time afterward to follow up on these cases. What you want to do is briefly pull alongside these offending drivers, ask for their license, snap it into fifths, politely hand them back the pieces, and proceed onward. 16. If you are hit by a car at work while you are on foot, but you are not badly injured, your coworkers will express some nominal concern about your well-being, quickly followed by a rush to come up with an appropriate nickname for you, which will probably be speed bump. 17. If you come across a traffic accident that involves downed power lines, have all the vehicle occupants put their hands in their pockets so they don't touch anything, and tell them to stay in their car. They'll be protected from electrocution there because car tires are rubber and grounded. If they're already out, have them shuffle at least 50 feet from the car because the ground around them could be energized. If they start to run, they'll get zapped as soon as they pick up a foot. And if they get closer than 6 feet to a live wire, it can actually come after them like some kind of sentient snake, as wires naturally seek the low ground. 18. You don't always have a lot of time to pull cars over, especially when the calls for service are being dispatched at a breakneck pace. So when you do, you're looking for a decent payoff, like a driver with open warrants, or drugs, or a gun. For that reason, you tend not to pull over women, who statistically don't yield this type of payoff as often as men. If you were ever called before a commission on gender equality in traffic stops, you would be found lacking. But you believe in your methodology and have had success with it. When you pull a car over without knowing the sex of the driver and then see it's a woman, you go ahead with the stop and usually find no good warrants, no drugs, and no guns. You then leave, your philosophy reinforced. Although once in a while you picture a trio of female armed robbers in a car, the vehicles stuffed with weapons and ill-gotten gains, as they pass and give you a sweet collective wave, as you wave back absently, scanning for a male driver to stop. It may be worth noting here that I don't know how many female cops share this philosophy of avoiding women drivers on traffic stops. Perhaps I shouldn't speak for my female colleagues. As my wife is quick to point out to me, I don't know much about women.
And that was Chapter 11 from 400 Things Cops Know, Street Smart Lessons from a Veteran Patrolman by Adam Plantinga. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.